So the reboot, leading with impact in the AI era. So I've already asked a couple of you, some have done it, to just say where you're coming from, because it's always very nice to see we have people all over the world, although the majority will be from Brussels, where I'm based as well. Also, I would like to ask you, and this is just an invitation for yourself, if possible, because I know a lot of us like to multitask, to do several things at the same time. But I think this will be very useful for you, and you will understand even better why I'm asking this at the end of our hour together. But if possible, to really be there with your full attention, grab a cup of tea or coffee, and try to be 100% present for today's session, because it's going to be packed with information that is very important. So who am I? My name is Muriel, and I'm the founder of Key Leader, where we help leaders build meaningful lives and organizations. And we try to find a balance between impact, knowing what we want and reaching it, balance, knowing what gives energy and having a positive energy balance, and meaning, being aligned with our values. Then I'm also an academic director at Solvay Brussels School for 2 programs, leading authentically in fast and busy times and leading through empowerment about designing hybrid teams. I'm the podcast host of Rebel Leader with a Heart. So if you liked this, we will be publishing more information in the podcast about artificial intelligence and how it's impacting us. So be sure to subscribe. It's available on all the major podcast platforms. Then I'm also a part-time digital nomad. I like to travel, and this is me in Costa Rica at a yoga retreat. And then I am a heavy user of ChatGPT and also other platforms. And when I say heavy user, I used it from the beginning. And so I could immediately see the huge benefits, but because I've also been overusing it, I've also saw the big downside of AI and the big pitfalls that I'm going to talk about as well later in this webinar. And then I used to be the managing director of an educational publishing company that I transformed for the digital times. Now, what I'm going to show you today is that, yes, AI can be fantastic as it exponentially increases our output and productivity. But at the same time, it doesn't necessarily increase your impact. And sometimes even on the contrary, and I'll show you why. Also, you will see that instead of decreasing your workload, probably AI will further increase your workload. That is very high already today. And that is because of how you have been raised in school and in your career. It has nothing to do with the technology on itself. It has more to do about how you use this technology. And this is unless you reboot yourself, which is the name of the webinar. And unless you do that, unless you reprogram yourself, you recondition yourself, you won't probably master AI, but rather it will probably control you. Or second option, you won't be able to implement it fast enough in your team or in your organization. Now, a little bit about how AI and technology is disrupting the world of work. First of all, this is some research from edX done with 800 executives and 800 employees. And there they estimate that half of our skills will be outdated within 2 years, half of our skills, and that we are unprepared for that. And it will mainly be the entry-level jobs or the more repetitive jobs. So we are not ready for that. When we look at what is happening already now, we see, for instance, Duolingo that has fired thousands of translators because of AI that can replace them, partly, of course. We see also, this is a business owner who fired his customer service staff because he noticed that ChatGPT could do a better job than they were doing. And this is a company, Stack Overflow, a programming company that has to lay off 28% of its workforce because of AI. So this is only the beginning, but here we see the massive shift that is already happening. Of course, there is also good news, because when you look at new jobs that are created, there are a lot of new AI jobs being created as well. So lots of jobs will disappear or completely change. New jobs will be created. Now, my experience with ChatGPT is I have developed and trained 3 ChatGPT agents myself. One for my course and content creation, one for my marketing and sales, and one for my podcast management. And how do you see those ChatGPT agents? It's like your own AI assistants that you have programmed to have a lot of knowledge in a certain domain. And you don't have to have computer skills to do that. For instance, I will show you right after this slide, the one I've created for the management of my podcast. It took me less than 1 hour to create that one. And it really changes a lot, because now my output has exponentially increased. And I can publish my podcast with a blog, with 2 LinkedIn posts, with SEO keywords in 15 minutes instead of 4 hours in the past. That's just an example. I can also use ChatGPT. It helps me a lot with my research. So it can find a lot of research when I want to claim something. It's very easy to find references on research that backs up my claim, to find stories, to write my book, to write lessons. I can have a marketing and sales plan in 10 minutes. So it's really amazing. And I wanted to show you. So a lot of you already know ChatGPT. Here you have the ChatGPTs that you can create, or some have been made public, and you can just like an app store in the past, you can subscribe to public GPTs as well. And so here I'm going to show you just what it does when I simply upload the transcript of a podcast episode. So this is the only thing I do. I upload it, I say, yeah. And then you see here the show notes that are being written, a blog article, then 2 LinkedIn posts, and my SEO keywords. So this was just a short demo to show you that it's really easy to program your own assistants. And since the launch, and in fact, 2 months after the launch of the beta version of these custom GPTs, already 3 million GPTs have been created. So it's really amazing. And this is going to be the future. So the future is going to be that, in fact, and these are the ones I created, my sons created their own versions, custom GPTs for their studies. And you can, of course, also find other custom GPTs. Now, what's going to happen, in fact, is we are going to disrupt our own jobs ourselves. We are all going to create a digital or AI version of ourselves, or even different versions of ourselves in AI, and those will become our assistants. So we will all have a bunch of assistants that will help us and that can replace, of course, current people that are working with you. That's why those entry-level jobs that I showed in the beginning of the webinar are slowly going to disappear. But it also means that it's not that the job that AI is delivering is perfect. You might still need to control it, but creating something from scratch or controlling it is completely different. And so how is it disrupting the world of work? It will automate routine tasks. You will be able to customize and personalize many things. So for instance, I can now personalize each lesson in my courses, for instance, very rapidly to the 16 MBTI personality types, very rapidly. There will be jobs that will disappear. Of course, we will have more and more predictive analytics. And in fact, AI will augment our current capabilities. It will create new jobs as well. There will be lots of ethical and regulatory challenges. And there will be a huge reskilling and upskilling of workforce because simple tasks will be replaced. And so we will have to form people, to train people in the more complex tasks. And of course, there is an explosion of misinformation. So I didn't show it here, but it's today also very easy. I've created a video of myself talking in Italian while I don't speak Italian and explaining something very easily. And you don't see that it's doubled because the technology even changes the lip movement. So you can imagine what it can give in terms of misinformation. All right, so I've already asked it in the beginning, but a lot of new people joined. Have you already been in touch with AI a little bit, regularly, or not at all? Just let me know in the chat. Now, something very strange also is happening. I don't know if you've noticed this. Have you noticed that with the rise of all these technologies that are designed to increase our productivity, that we have never worked this hard and we have without necessarily increasing our impact? Okay, so that's very ironic. We have all this technology designed to increase our productivity, and most of us have never worked this hard. And when we look at statistics from our assessment, so we have developed an assessment and we will share the link with you at the end, an assessment that can measure how adapted you are to the fast and busy times. So we've already had more than 400 answers. What we see is that 69% of the respondents have a high or very high workload. That for 63% workload has increased. Well, we should think that it should decrease with all these new technologies. And 40% of the people claim they need to work harder for the same impact. So it's really ironic. It's like your productivity is increasing, you put more effort, but you don't necessarily reach better results or more impact. And when I say impact, I always mean reaching your objectives in this in today's webinar. So there is a mismatch between the pace at which we can think and adapt compared to the pace at which technology is evolving. And currently, a lot of those big tech companies are waiting to release technology because they know we are not ready for it. And this is now, of course, because they can afford to wait. But since more and more are competing with each other, at some point they will release technology out there and we won't be ready for it as organizations or as society. Now, so why is it increasing our workloads? Why is, in fact, all this technology designed to make us more productive, increasing our workload? And that's because the time we all have, and especially organizations have, to adapt to these new technologies is way shorter. So there in the past, you had years or months to adapt to one technology. Today, you have one technology after the other. Every month, you have something new that is there and that creates opportunities, but also sometimes big threats for your own organization. So in fact, what we could say is that the pace of change is accelerating. So this was pre-digitalization. and I call this slow times. In the digital era, it was already accelerating, and with AI, it will be exponential. And the problem is that we have been conditioned, we really have been shaped and trained for those slow times. And so without a reboot of your leaders, of your workers, but I will say even more, even the reboot of our teenagers, of our children, without that, we risk going from thriving in slow times with the habits that we had to, and that's where most people are today, they are surviving in the digital era to drowning in the AI era, because the workload is going to keep coming. And so why is that? And why are we not ready for AI and exhausting ourselves? It's because in those slower time, well, things were easier. So in fast times, there is a boost in opportunities and threats. And so just imagine when you had 75 years to adapt your organization to the telephone, well, you didn't have many opportunities and threats, or you had a lot of time to adapt to it. But today, with every month or every week, a new technology, new regulation, new expectations that are arising, it creates a huge boost in possible opportunities that if you don't seize them, but your competitor does, might be an issue, and possible threats, because there might be new businesses out there that make your current business model completely redundant. So you can imagine the pressure it makes, it holds within an organization. And then with the digitalization of a lot of things that we are doing, the tasks are less delimited. You often have to decide when you're going to stop working on something, because you can always make it better, align more, do more research. We now get requests from many more channels than before. Sometimes you don't even remember where you got something. Was it in chat, in WhatsApp, in your LinkedIn messaging? Was it in a meeting? Did somebody call you? We have, with this hybrid work and 24/7 connection, a lot of us have completely lost our structure. We don't know anymore when we work, and we don't know anymore when we relax. It's completely intertwined, with a result that people are working more since we're working hybrids than before. And because all these technologies and all this innovation is often different technologies that you combine together, well, that's also reflecting in organizations where all the jobs are intertwined. So in the past, you could really implement something within your own department. Today, you constantly need to align with other departments. And so some people spend their whole days in meetings with barely time to think about those opportunities and those threats and doing their jobs. And so all this is creating, in fact, an explosion of workload. And it has simply become impossible to deliver everything. And workloads will get worse because AI will further boost opportunities and threats and disrupt many businesses. So if you thought that AI was the answer, well, of your workload problem today, of the fact that you are tired or exhausted, think again. And so we have this massive boost in opportunities and threats, massive changes happening where we have to unlearn things and relearn things. And then on the other hand, we have been conditioned, like Pavlov conditioned his dogs, for slower times. And unfortunately, and that's why I said that the reboot is not only for people in companies, it should also be for our children and our teenagers, because we have been programmed in a way that if we deliver everything, if you relax only when work is finished, if you control everything, you don't make any mistakes, you are rational and show that you're strong, you work hard and you manage your time, then you're worthy. And you get good grades in school. If you don't do all that, you are worthless. And for years and years and years in school and in your career, you have been conditioned like this. Really like the little bell that Pavlov used for his dogs. This is our bell and our conditioning. And so these habits that we've had from a very young age, they translated into leadership habits that were very useful in slow times. So in slow times, you were in fact trained to become a good worker that delivers everything, a worker that is action-oriented. If you see an opportunity or a threat, you do something about it. Because yes, workload started to be bigger and bigger, you learn to manage your time. You also learn to be strong, to be rational, to not show weaknesses, and to work hard. If you did this, you reached great results and you delivered and you probably got promoted. And that was great in slow times. And so we have been trained and trained. And so most of us now have unconsciously linked our core identity to delivering, to working hard, being perfect, being rational and strong, and to controlling everything. And so that means that when you don't deliver everything, when you should say no, when you feel like you're losing control, when you make mistakes, when you take a break while work isn't finished, you feel guilty, not professional. You feel weak, you feel like you can't handle things, you feel very uncomfortable. And basically, you feel that you're not good enough. And in fact, that is not you who are feeling this. This is your conditioning. So I like to repeat this. This is how you have been conditioned. Just like the dogs of Pavlov salivate when they hear the bell, you have been conditioned to feel bad when you are not in control, when you make mistakes, when you don't do everything, when you dare to say no, when you take a break. And that is a huge issue because those habits, they will make you work harder, because you will find yourself in this catch-22 where on one hand, we have an explosion of workload that is impossible to deliver. And on the other hand, you feel worthless if you don't deliver everything and pause. And so as a result, what we see is that more and more people become overwhelmed, a hardworking, overwhelmed person that numbs their emotions to appear strong and to continue delivering. Because you want to deliver, it's the only way that you feel worthy. And on the other hand, another pitfall is also you become this strong and busy expert, but that is struggling with change because you are very afraid and uncomfortable of making mistakes or of failing. Or if you have to learn new skills, which you will have to learn in a world that is constantly transforming, because adapting means learning new skills. And when you're learning new skills, you're a beginner. And so you are incompetent. You're not good at it yet in the beginning, but you'd hate feeling that way. And so you stay very rigid, the strong and busy expert, but that is struggling a lot with the fast pace of change. And as a result, your organization doesn't adapt fast enough. You don't manage to implement all these new technologies fast enough, because to implement new things, it's to try new things, to be innovative, to make mistakes, to allow yourself not to control everything. And because you need energy to be creative, you have to take breaks, although your work is never finished. And so that's the result. The other result is that your impact decreases because yes, you have a lot of output, but you have to learn to run so fast and work so hard for it that you get tired, you exhaust yourself. And when you're exhausted, when you are tired, you don't perform as well. That's really what research shows. You don't make good decisions. You don't find great solutions. You lose your motivation. You can compensate by drinking, gaming, binge watching Netflix. And then a big illness of today is that you're not present enough for the people you care about, your colleagues, but also your family, yourself. And I'm not only talking physically, I'm talking mentally. You're constantly overthinking things in your head, constantly thinking of what's next, what do I need to do? You numb yourself to continue delivering. And so I've put here some signals, and then I'm going to ask you to evaluate yourself, that are showing that your organization might not be ready for the tsunami wave that is coming from AI. And that is when you have difficulties adapting to change. And I'm going to let you evaluate yourself in the chat. If you already have a high workload, well, we are only at the beginning of the big, huge tsunami change. When there is a lot of fatigue, stress, and burnouts in your organization, engagement can be low. And this is sometimes a form of protection. And then we start detaching ourselves to not burn out. When you have difficulties hiring and retaining young talent, because young people don't want to work in organizations like I described just now. When you're more reactive to market changes instead of proactive, when you don't have a clear strategy, and especially AI strategy, when you don't have a learning and adaptive culture. Yes, you might know what change management is, but this is not sufficient anymore. Change management was nice when we had change once in a while. Now you have to become a learning and adaptive culture. That means a learning and adaptive person. And when you have traditional leadership, that is with top-down culture. So let me look at how ready is your organization. I don't know if you've answered it already. Is it not at all ready? Is it somewhat ready? Or is it C, ready? Mostly Bs. Okay, that's already nice. It's, to be honest, it's not what I see in organizations when I get there. I think a lot of organizations are still very coping with today's changes, especially when you look at well-being statistics and stress and burnouts. Okay. So the other thing is, why do many of us increased our outputs and work, but not necessarily our impact? Again, despite this technology designed to increase our productivity. And that's very simple. If tomorrow, thanks to AI, and you have developed your own AI agents like I did, and you manage to do your work not in 8 hours like a normal day, but in 5 hours, would you leave? Would you leave then at 3 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the afternoon and go home? Probably not, because we have this explosion of workload. So you will just pick the next thing that is out there. This is why you're not necessarily increasing your impact, but also because the norm changes. If tomorrow, thanks to AI, we can do the same job with half the people, that will unfortunately become the norm with our current economical system. And those people will just have to even deliver more output. And so there is also this curve that I like to present that shows, on one hand, your productivity and efforts, and we could say this is your output. And on the other hand, you have the impact, the results that you achieve. And most of us in our early career, we learn to become more and more productive until we reach peak performance. But then what happened is that we started to put more and more effort, but at the cost of our own energy level. And that's when we start to get tired and get poor performance. That's what really we see, where workload has increased, but people have to work harder for the same impact. This is what is happening now. And I think the problem today is that most people are on this side of the graph instead of staying at peak performance because of your conditioning again, because you don't manage to stop or to be creative or to learn fast enough and to adapt fast enough. And there is a law for this, and it's called the law of diminished returns. And I believe that if we don't reprogram ourselves with a slow times mindset and artificial intelligence that will be able to even create more output, well, we risk even getting lower on this curve. And so what I want to show you is really the way to go from here to, in fact, here. And that's what I believe is possible with AI and a reboot, where you work less, you see, less effort, but you reach a greater impact. So when we look at the benefits of a reboot, we see that people that have already changed their habits, and there aren't many of them, and don't worry, you'll be able to assess yourself. Don't worry if your score is low, it's normal because we are still programmed for the slower times. But we see that people that have rebooted have 47% more impact, double more energy, are way more motivated, and also have more meaning. And on the other hand, the workload decreases a lot. There is less turnover. They have 50% less chance to look for another job in the year to come. Stress decreases and they work less. So really what I showed you is coming out also of our research. The fact that it is possible when you reboot yourself and then use the new technologies to reach 47% more impact with 10% less hours worked. But currently, only 16% of the respondents are rebooted, which is completely normal, of course, because we have been conditioned for this world that unfortunately doesn't exist anymore. So are you ready to take the red pill and to discover what a reboot is? And I'm going to go pretty rapidly over the reboots. I'm going to explain you what it is and especially what the first step you can take if you want to reboot yourself. And it's going to be very counterintuitive. It's probably not what you think you should do if you want to adapt faster, become more agile, and have more impact in a world that is getting faster and faster. So what is the reboot? And the reboot is, instead of delivering everything, it has become impossible today to do everything. So we have to focus. But focus means learning to say no. And when you say no, you feel guilty, you feel not professional, especially when you say no to a boss. He might think that you can't handle things. So that's why it's so difficult, because when you focus, that is when your conditioning kicks in. And then you have to, instead of being action-oriented, first purpose-oriented, because we now know that there is so much change that the what you need to do is very important, to think about what you want to achieve, but the what you want to achieve will constantly change. You will constantly have a new role, new colleagues, new job descriptions, new projects. And so because it changes constantly, what we notice and what research shows is that your why and your values become way more important. And so your purpose is very important, especially if you need to reinvent yourself for these AI times. You need to know, what do we stand for? Why do we exist? What do we want to achieve in a very far future? And then, of course, you think about the first step to get there. And then instead of managing our time, so it's about, and of course, if you don't know what you want to achieve, you don't know what to say yes to and what to say no to, and you can't focus then. So this is just a testimonial from somebody that has rebooted and that was wondering, should I stay in this job or should I look for another job? Because that person had lost his motivation. So the reboot is also motivating because it allows you to reach better objectives without exhausting yourself. Okay, then instead of managing your time, it is so important to learn to manage your energy. Because when you are completely stressed, when you're completely exhausted, that's when you make a lot of mistakes. That's when you snap at your colleagues. That's when your collaborations degrade. That's when you're not innovative. And that is when you will resist change because you can't handle it anymore. So you will resist change, minimize it, ignore it, or you will blame other people. And so I realized during the transformation of my organization, and even today, managing my energy is my #1 job. And we see in all the statistics, or when I talked to CEOs and HR directors, they are telling me people in our company are tired. Yes, they're doing fine sometimes, and not in all companies, but they are tired. And imagine that if you are already tired now, and we're not in the complete disruption that is coming at us. So this reboot is really necessary. And so that is why managing my energy became my #1 job. And here, because that's a big mistake that companies make, is that we often separate well-being from performance. So we have lots of well-being courses in organizations, and what we see is that well-being keeps decreasing because often people know what they should do, but remember, the conditioning kicks in. And so they feel compelled to work harder. They feel compelled to not stopping. And so, yes, they know what is necessary to increase their energy, but they can't do it. So it's very, very important to train our employees and ourselves, of course, to handle every situation, every challenge, every problem in a way that increases your impact while still having energy. Because if you separate those two, you won't get there. Either you won't have impact or you won't have energy, or very often even you won't have both. And managing energy, I like to say that it's like managing your cash. You wouldn't put more, or you wouldn't withdraw more money from your bank account than you put money on it, because otherwise you would go bankrupt. It's the same with your energy. If you do too many things that cost you energy and you don't compensate that with things that give you energy, like sleep or being with friends or taking care of yourself or doing some fun things, you will lose energy and it will directly impact your performance and your ability to implement those AI technologies. And then this is the most important habit, and this is where you should start, is to change your mindset, because that's the only way that you can reprogram yourself. Because the results that you achieve are not only based on facts, but they are based on your interpretation of these facts. And so let me illustrate this with a short video.
Before April 1954, the common belief, the universal belief, because it had been tried again and again and again, and people had failed, the belief was that man was not physically capable of breaking the 4-minute barrier, that he could not run a mile in less than 4 minutes. When something happens to them, they begin to believe that that's the way it is. That's the way it's always been. And they can't see the possibility of it being any different.
150 yards to go, and Bannister takes over. Watch his giant stride taking to the front as he races the last lung-bursting.
Roger Bannister came along, and he broke the 4-minute barrier. Since that time, up to this day, over 20,000 people have done it, including high school kids. 20,000 people. What changed? Here's what happened when they got on the track. They knew it had been done. Because they knew it had been done, there was a new belief about this barrier that was unreachable. And those 20,000 people got in a race believing, knowing in their heart that someone had done it, that it's possible, that they could do it. If someone can make their dream become a reality, then you can make your dream become reality.
And so your mindset is very, very important because it will change how you handle change, how you handle the workload, how you handle everything in your life. And so remember your programming, and the programming where if you do all this, you feel that you are worthy, is in fact standing in the way, because this exact programming conditioning for many years leads to a fixed mindset where you avoid mistakes, where you think immediately that you're not good enough when you hit a challenge, where you want to give up when it's too hard. And I'm really talking about experience because I'm teaching this. I'm teaching how to grow your mindset, how to have a positive mindset, but my conditioning is still there. So I can only change my fixed mindset to a growth mindset when I develop this emotional intelligence. Because managing your mindset, whether it is to have a positive one or a growth mindset, requires emotional intelligence. And a lot of leaders, a lot of people out there, they know exactly what a growth mindset is. And I have a test, and I'm sure you would test very high on what a growth mindset is. But you don't have the emotional experience of the growth mindset without you being aware of it. And that's the problem. That is what is standing in the way of you reconditioning yourself and then being able to use that technology at your service. So this is just some feedback where this change is the biggest change that we see when we reprogram people. It's the reprogramming of your thoughts, of your mindset, of your interpretations. And then lastly, if you want to focus, be purposeful, manage your energy, be aware of your mindset, your emotions, the thoughts that you have, well, you have to learn to slow down and take breaks. Because slowing down, there is a lot of research about this. And I know a lot of you are very rational and you need the research. Well, the research shows that slowing down helps you make better decisions, enhance creativity, become a better problem solver. It increases your impact. Taking regular breaks, this is really research that showed that the most productive employees worked less than the less productive employees because they took more breaks and they could then recharge, be more innovative, have better relationships. Think about what they actually wanted to reach, which is something that you will have to do very often. And in fact, it's about accelerating when the road is clear and the car is in optimal condition, and slowing down when the road is foggy or curvy. So when things are not clear or you face challenges, or when the car needs fuel or maintenance. So when you lack energy. And we have, again, been programmed to do the exact opposite. when we face challenges, when we have too many things to do, when we are stressed, that's often when we work harder. Well, it should be our cue to stop, recharge, think about what we want to achieve, look at our mindset, change our emotions, our mindset. And then once we know again what we want, then we can accelerate again. Okay, so, and here is another testimonial, because I'm telling you this, but this is something that you need to experience. So a lot of these habits that I showed are very counterintuitive. And so you have to experience them to start seeing the results. Now, how hard is it for you to slow down when you're overwhelmed or when things don't go as planned? Because that is the cue to slow down. It's easy to slow down when things go well. And by the way, when things go well, that's your cue to not slow down, but work harder. So these are the 5 habits to reboot yourself. It's focusing, and then what you have decided to focus on, you deliver with quality. Being purposeful and first, and then act skillfully. Managing your energy before your time. Being first mindset driven and conscious of your actions under pressure. Conscious of your thoughts, conscious of your emotions that make you react to situations instead of respond skillfully and act with courage and strength, and regularly pausing and slowing down to then later accelerate and work smarter. And that is how you will get from here to here. That is the progression that we see after 4 months of reprogramming. Of course, after 4 months, you're not totally reprogrammed, but you are well on your way. So we see that people are way more adapted to the fast and busy times. Focus increases, purpose a little bit, but was already high. Energy increases a bit, and especially mindset and the rhythm improves drastically. And of course, the impact. So in slow times, we have an explosion of workloads. In fast times, especially with AI coming at us, we have an explosion of workload. And because of our conditioning, well, that conditioning combined with the explosion of workload make us work harder, run faster, and make us not adapt fast enough, because this conditioning really leads us to become more rigid persons, not agile people. Then we need to reprogram ourselves with the 5 habits I talked about, and especially the mindset part. And that is how you will feel better, your impact will increase, and your organization will be able to adapt. And self-awareness, and that means being aware of your thoughts, of your emotions, of what you want to achieve, of what you're going to say no to, of all the things, being aware of that in the moment, when somebody asks you something, when you feel a stress in you that is going to make you that is going to make you act in your old conditioning. When you are aware of that, then you become a choice, and you have the choice then to do the more productive habits, to focus, to think about what do I want to achieve, to respond to a situation, to be innovative, to take a break even if it feels uncomfortable. Now, I just wanted to end with the battle of consciousness, I call it, because we often ask the question, do we think that AI will become conscious one day? Because AI is now evolving at a very rapid pace. We will soon reach what we call singularity, where AI has reached the same level or even has surpassed our level of intelligence. And so the question is often, will it be conscious? Well, I think a better question is, how conscious are we as human beings? Because when I shared with you in the beginning our conditioning, the fact that we are running and running and running, in fact, we are becoming robots instead of being conscious. And this is just a graph showing what an 18-year-old's remaining time in month looks like. So assuming that that 18-year-old person will reach 90 years, they have approximately this many months to live. And when we remove sleep, when we remove work and school, and for you guys, work is often behind the screen as well, don't remember that. When we remove driving, when we remove cooking and eating, which is also often done behind the screen, bathroom hygiene, we are left with 334 months. And when we look at the current statistics of screen time of 18-year-olds, but unfortunately we are a little bit better, but we're not that good. We looked at from those 334 months, 312 months are spent behind screens if we continue at this rhythm. And so what we see is that we are being zombified or anesthetized. So we have this AI becoming more and more conscious, and we are becoming less and less conscious and aware. And that is why this awareness, developing this awareness, being conscious of what you feel, of what you think, of what you want, especially under pressure, is really important. So just look at yourself. How much time do you spend behind screens? And I believe this reboot and this becoming self-aware is our next step in evolution. It's our next struggle if we want to continue to survive. Because we don't want you to become a slave of technology. We want you to become a master of it by rebooting yourself and waking up. And waking up, I mean by that again, becoming aware. It's so important to be aware and not simply live in your conditioning combined with the technology designed to make you addicted. You're completely unaware and unconscious, and you can live your whole life with barely being aware of what is happening. And that is really what is necessary. Because without the reboot, you really risk decreasing your performance. So invest in yourself, invest in learning, invest in this reprogramming yourself. This is essential because it's going to get worse. If you're waiting for having more time, for having less workload before you start changing yourself, changing the culture within your organization, you will wait for a long time because that time will never come. So, and I don't want you to choose. We are compelled and think that we have, if we want to continue working, we don't have a choice. We have to be like that. And I can assure you that you have a choice. I became a managing director of my organization while I was probably one of the people that worked the least. And with inspiring leaders, that's what I see also. They are not working harder. And I'm talking about truly inspiring leaders. When you're running all the time, going from one meeting to the next one, and constantly running with no time for yourself, your family, or your colleagues, you're not inspiring. You will not bring what it takes for your organization to transform. So I explained to you the why you need to reboot yourself, what the reboot is very quickly, and the how, of course, is a whole trajectory, and it's not enough to explain it in this 1-hour webinar. But if you'd like, we, of course, can accompany you and your organization in this transformation. That is what we do, and through individual programs, in company, keynotes. But it's a very counterintuitive program. And it's designed to reprogram busy people, not to give simply knowledge, because you have enough knowledge. And it's not knowledge that we need anymore. We need agile people and conscious and self-aware people. It's a mix of inspiration moments, coaching, self-coaching, and online micro content, because we need to reprogram you. And we can't do that in 1 hour webinar, for instance, or in 1 day workshop. This is a reprogramming of years and years, and you need to slowly become reprogrammed with your busy schedule. It's a combination of deep moments and of fun, of course. And we transform at a level of being, way more than doing or knowing. And for that, we use the latest neuroscience. You get a certificate from Solvay Brussels School. Our next edition, if you want to join the individual course, is May 27th. I will give you the presentation at the end. We have lots of great testimonials, and this course is really designed to become another person. And many people say, why didn't I learn this earlier? And want to share this knowledge with their kids, with their colleagues, because it's the next step we need. So these are some of our customers. We work mainly with big organizations, and we really change that culture so that you become agile, so that you have balance, meaning, and impact. And so we have 2 minutes left. So it was very challenging for me because I can talk for hours about AI, about all these habits, and I wanted to really respect your time. Of course, it's very precious. I wanted to thank you for taking the time to be here, because I know you have a very busy schedule, and I hope I have inspired you to start being more self-aware, to be more self-aware of what is happening inside of you, your thoughts, your emotions, because that will be your cue. That is how I transformed my organization for the digital times. And that is how I help my customers transform their DNA, their culture, so that they can become more agile and adopt all these new technologies without losing their people, without further exhausting them. So I don't know if you have a question. And yes, maybe. Thank you, Elisabeth. If you would like to assess yourself, and Elisabeth will put also the link in the chat, but here is the QR code if you would like to assess how adapted you are to the fast and busy times. So if you have a question, I'm gonna stop sharing now so that I can see you again. If you need to go, it's 1:30, so please go, of course. But otherwise, if you have a question, I will stay a while longer, and you can type it in the comments, or you can simply ask it, of course, because we are in a meeting. So I see lots of things. Hi, Noel. How are you? And hi, Manuela. So I see lots of familiar faces. Caroline, thank you for joining us also from all the way in the US. So please don't hesitate. You can ask me the questions, by the way, and Magali, one of the first ones doing that has gone through the course. Yeah. Yeah, somebody has a... Hi.
Yes, hi, Muriel, it's Leen Crollet. We recently met. I put my remark, it's more a remark than a request or than a question. I have a strong feeling that in this rebooting process, there's one element that I don't immediately find in your approach.
Yeah.
And my feeling is that there's also a part to play with creative expression, because training your creative expression is a process. It's focusing on what is happening and reacting on what is happening, and not needing to go to a certain goal or whatever. And it trains other abilities. and allows you to let's say link the two halves of your brain more strongly and come up with more innovative solutions, ways of thinking, etc. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, no, creativity is really very important because, and that was my experience with overusing ChatGPT. I didn't share it, but from overusing ChatGPT, I noticed that my creativity went down. My skills were degrading. My output increased. I started working more, and then I had to correct and correct and correct because I didn't like what was coming out of it because it lacks creativity, it lacks innovation. And so that's very important. But to be innovative, it's a process where you need to slow down, you need to stop, you need to do something completely different from your work. And that's again something that we have not been programmed for. It's not being valued to say, you know what, I'm going to stop now. I'm going to go for a walk because I need a creative idea, which I do very often. I'd go to lots of walks. I like to be inspired to read random things that are completely unrelated to my work. But then a connection comes from two things that are unrelated. And we really need that creativity today to find better business solutions to the problems that we are facing. So yes, I completely agree. Thank you for that. And I see Emmanuel, Karine. Nice to see you all. Yeah. So I don't know. The ambulance is coming by. I don't know if you hear it. So I don't know if you have another question for me. I hope I have inspired you to, and yeah, my mission is really to make you realize how important it is to become human, to become aware, to notice your emotions and manage them better. And that is the way through success in the future and not through the way that we're currently evolving. Okay, well, thank you. So if you don't have any questions anymore, thank you for being there, and we'll see each other again. Bye, everyone. Have a nice
Bye-bye.
week.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Hello. Voilà.